The Special Fathers Network is thrilled to be sponsored by Rubin Law, a multi-generational law firm dedicated exclusively to serving families raising children with special needs.
She would text us an update here that prepping is going well, surgery will start soon, and the messages were always positive. Surgery's going well, the girls are doing great. The hearts are indeed separate. And then a text message at 1:11 said, the girls are officially separate.
That's our guest on this two-part Special Fathers Network Dad-to-Dad podcast, Phil Irwin. Phil is the father of 3 girls, including 2 1.5-year-old twins, who were conjoined until just a few months ago. In this second part, we'll hear about the recent successful surgery to separate the twins. It's a fascinating story, and it's all on this Special Fathers Network Dad-to-Dad podcast. Here's our host, David Hirsch.
Hi, and thanks for listening to the Special Fathers Network Dad-to-Dad podcast. I'd also like to offer my heartfelt thanks to the following donors who supported the 21 CD Ironman campaign, who each contributed $1,000 or more to help keep our programs free to all concerned. In alphabetical order, they are Len Batterson, Ron Boxtaller, Anna and Greg Brown, the Canal Financial Group, Kim Duchessois, Chaz Edelstein, Chris and Christy Kazian, Bob Musikowski, the Peloton Dads Facebook group, Dick Reck, Kevin Richardson, and Tom Wake. Thanks for your generous support.
The Special Fathers Network is a dad-to-dad mentoring program for fathers raising children with special needs. Through our personalized matching process, new fathers with special needs children connect with mentor fathers in a similar situation. It's a great way for dads to support dads. To find out more, go to 21stcenturydads.org.
And if you're a dad looking for help or would like to offer help, we'd be honored to have you join our closed Facebook group. Please go to facebook.com/groups and search Dad to Dad.
And now let's hear the conclusion of this compelling conversation between Phil Irwin and David Hirsch. We'll start by hearing about Phil's transformation to being a stay-at-home dad for the twins.
Allison had gone back to work, and I went from working anywhere from 40 to 60 hours a week to being a stay-at-home dad and learning how to, I won't say learning how to care for conjoined twins, but learning how to be the guy all the time. I don't know if it's any easier one way or the other to be the full-time stay-at-home parent or the working parent, because there's pressure on both ends. The working parent, I always remember feeling like, boy, I had to come home and pick up and let Allison take a break because she's been doing so much for so long. But then as the full-time stay-at-home parent, I remember the pressure being, boy, you got to make sure these kids do well because people are depending on you guys to keep healthy babies so that they can be separated, right? So leading up to that, we had a small surgery in October for tissue expanders to be placed. Tissue expanders would allow the girls to grow their own skin to prepare themselves for surgery. So we began doing the tissue expander injections. They had surgery for that, and 2 weeks later they had to be readmitted to the NICU. They caught a cold, and we stayed there for 2 weeks, and we went back home and kept doing our routine of doctor appointments, at-home nurse visit, and just keeping the babies healthy and good and happy. Leading from December to February, their surgery was originally scheduled for February 6th, and they got sick on February 6th. We rushed them to the hospital. Chicago winters are much like Illinois winters. You can imagine what the weather's like in early February, and sick babies in the back of the car. We sped up to the hospital. We called our doctors on the way and said, we have sick girls. It was really only Sarah Beth that was really struggling. We couldn't keep her oxygen level above 80 to 85%. Scariest drive of my life. When we got right outside U of M, right outside the hospital, There's a left-hand turn you have to make, and then another left-hand turn, and you enter kind of the giant hospital circle drive. At the first left-hand turn, Sarah Beth's oxygen bottle ran out of oxygen. We had a spare, so Allison's in the back seat holding on to the girls and breathing into Sarah Beth's mouth and squeezing them, doing a hybrid type of chest compression. You know, you've got to imagine you're doing that to two girls at the same time. She's squeezing both girls at the same time and breathing into Sarah Beth's mouth. I'm switching an oxygen bottle, and then the light turned green, and I floored it. We got everything switched over. We had a pulse ox meter in the car hooked to her. I can still remember the sound of the beeping, and we didn't make it to the next green light. It was such a long line. I put my hazards on, and I honked my horn, and I floored it, and I drove around everybody. Everything just went perfect. There was cars coming. They stopped. We went through the circle drive. It's like a 25-mile-an-hour zone. I'm not sure how fast I was going. I know it wasn't 25. I remember jumping a curb in our little leased car, honking the horn, flashing my lights, and I got out of the car, barely had it in park, and Allison handed me the girls, and I ran into the emergency room. The girl at the front desk, she's just going through the motions. And, what are you here for? And I said, there's not time. And there was a lot more bad words mixed into that. And somebody recognized me and said, Twin Dad, come with me. And we ran to the bay, and we started getting to work right away. Meanwhile, Allison's back at the car with Kennedy, because we had Kennedy with us. And Allison's texting me, and is everything okay? What's going on? And here I am with the twins, and I'm also thinking about Allison and Kennedy. And I remember at one point, somebody brought Allison and Kennedy right outside the bay of the ER, and you've got like 20 people around a bed working on your twins, and your 3-year-old is right there, pretty oblivious to the situation. Typical 3-year-old, thank God. Allison looked at me, and she just needed a signal, like, is everything okay? And I said, yeah, everything's going to be okay. I ended up getting into a heated discussion with one of the, I don't know if she was a nurse or what her position was. I yelled at her. She was really concerned about the girl's NG, about Sarah Beth's NG. And they had this mask, they had a mask on Sarah Beth to force oxygen into her lungs and keep her lungs open. And Sarah Beth had her nasal cannula for oxygen, and the nurse was really concerned that she would have to cut those things with scissors. And I remember yelling at her and just saying, just do it, just cut it, it's replaceable. And she caught me in the hallway afterwards and apologized, and I said, that's okay. Heat of the moment, things are happening. It is what it is. And I got into another heated discussion with a very respected ENT doctor. He was ready to intubate both girls in the bay of the ER. The bay is where the ambulances come and drop patients off. Very hectic scenario. Mm-hmm. And I looked at him and I said, you can't do that here. Our girls have very special airways. They're complicated airways. You need a calm, controlled, quiet environment to do this. You cannot do this here. And he looked at me like, do you know who you're speaking to? I didn't back down. Knowing what I know now, a baby that is on a ventilator bag where they're doing the puffball, you can do that for hours. You don't have to ventilate right then. You can wait until an ideal scenario. I don't know if that's the same for adults, but babies, you can do that. And then, luckily, our surgeon team was all on staff that day, and they all knew we were coming because I had made a couple phone calls to different people in the hospital let them know we were going to be there and when we were going to be there. And Dr. George came in, and he saw the tools to do the intubation, and he said, you can't do that here. And I just remember, I didn't smile then. but I remember just like validated. Like,
Take a step back, Phil. I think it's the hand of God playing here.
oh yeah,
Getting into the hospital, sort of like in this unorthodox method that you did, which was you as a dad having that protective, spirit jump into play. And then, all the pieces of the puzzle came together in a way that you had no control over. It's just another example of the hand of God.
oh yeah. So long and short of that is they went to the ER. The girls were put under anesthesia. They were both intubated. They both have to be intubated because they're conjoined, and they're conjoined, and their livers are separate but fused, and there's a little bit of blood crossover. So any medicine that you might give one girl will then affect, in some way, shape, or form, her sister. So they both have to be intubated, and they both have to be under anesthesia. And after all of this is done, my wife is looking at me, and she's like, I was really scared that we were going to lose Sarah Beth. She goes, weren't you? And I said, nope. And she like looked at me and she goes, come on. I said, no. I said, that's not the plan. I said, that's not what I saw when I saw our three girls playing in the yard. That's not what I heard when I knew that we were going to be okay. That's not the end of this book. That's not the end of this chapter. I knew we were going to be fine. What degree of fine that was is unknown, but I just knew in my heart that wasn't how their story went. So we spent 40 days in the pediatric ICU. Surgery got canceled. We're into March of this year now, and all of the executive orders and the shutdowns start beginning. All non-essential surgeries are postponed or canceled. There is nothing paperwork-wise saying that the twins absolutely had to be separated. So after 44 days, the girls were well enough to be home. So the doctors looked at us and said, you guys need to go home. You need to get out of the hospital. And I looked at them and I said, okay, we don't know anything about the virus. ICU beds may become in short supply. We're in a PICU that has the ability to treat adults. What if the girls get sick again? How can we know that they will be able to come here and get the treatment that they need? And they said, well, you let us worry about that. And I said, well, we're not going to go to any other hospital. We come here. We come to U of M for these twins. So we went home. We had a very different pandemic than everybody else. Our life didn't change that much. We already lived a kind of an isolated, quiet quarantine life because we were scared that both times the girls got sick, they tested positive for the common cold, and the common cold, because they didn't move air being conjoined the same way that you or I do, led to pneumonia. So we were very cautious about visitors and being out and about. I'm sure a lot of special needs parents very much understand that statement, where a common cold can be very, very detrimental. So we went home and we had a nice pandemic together, as goofy as that sounds. And that leads up until August. And the girls' surgery was scheduled for August 5th. And very similar feeling, driving to the hospital at 5 o'clock in the morning with my parents staying at our house to take care of Kennedy. Although this time there's no visitors allowed. So if things don't go well, we can't bring Kennedy in to see her sisters, or we can't bring our parents in. We don't necessarily have a support network there at the hospital with us. So we said our goodbyes to the girls at 6:45 or 7 a.m. Prepping for surgery began, and we have made really, really good friendships with everybody on our team, and they all had our personal cell phone numbers, and they gave us the pager where they could send messages, but there was one person in particular had been with us from their day one of knowing the twins, and she was texting us, and we stayed out in our car during surgery. She would text us an update here or there. Prepping is going well, surgery will start soon, and the messages were always positive. Surgery's going well, the girls are doing great. The hearts are indeed separate, and the hearts are separated from the giant shared pericardium that they had. And then a text message at 1:11 said, the girls are officially separate. So surgery started at about 11, and by 1:11, there was officially two separate girls on the same bed. And by about 3 o'clock, the phone rang instead of a text message, and it was the cardiac surgeon, and he just called to let us know that his reconstruction of the chest wall went very well on Sarah Beth. And then a few minutes later, maybe 30 minutes later, another phone call. Amelia's chest reconstruction went very well. And then by 7:30 p.m., I want to say everything was done. The girls were stitched up and closed, and the plastic surgeons even took the time to create belly buttons for the girls.
Oh, wow.
By 9 p.m., the girls were up in their room in the PICU in separate beds. And it's just such a funny thing for us to see separate beds. 2 girls in 2 beds. And for everybody else, anybody passing by that room, it may not have looked normal because an ICU room typically doesn't house 2 patients at the same time. But here we are, 2 patients, 2 beds. And people would ask us, how are you doing? And I'd say something stupid like, 2 beds! And the child life specialist on the floor, he looked at me the one day and he goes, I don't even know how to empathize with you because you keep saying, look at them, they're in 2 beds because that looks so normal to me. I just smile and say, look, they're in 2 beds. There's 2 girls in 2 beds. There's not 2 girls in 1 bed stuck to each other. There's 2 girls in 2 beds. And he'd laugh and he'd say, okay. He goes, that's awesome. And about a full month later, everybody's discharged at home. And there was a few battles in between where Amelia struggled. Amelia had always tended to be the stronger twin of the 2 when they were conjoined. Nobody was really worried about Amelia and surgery. The worry was more placed on Sarah Beth. She was our oxygen-dependent girl. And Sarah Beth just did her normal, slow and steady pace, where she rested for 2 weeks post-surgery, got extubated, and that girl, once she was extubated, she lit up. Her personality just would shine like we've never seen it. And Amelia, this poor girl, ended up getting a bed sore on the back of her head because as she was intubated, they would try to reposition her back and forth. And one time she would be like looking at the window, and one time she would be looking at the hallway. Well, anytime they placed her body so that it would be facing the window, she would turn her head so that she would face the center of the room so she could see the doctors and her sister. So there was always pressure on one spot on the back of her head, which has fully recovered by this point. But so that Amelia fought the intubation and the sedation for 2 weeks, and because of that, she spent an extra 5 days or so in the hospital recovering. And now we're home, and if you never met the girls before August, you would never believe me if I said these were the twins that were separated at U of M. Because they're making up for lost time. They are so fast. They can go across the living room and crawl like you wouldn't believe. They're almost walking.
Well, thanks for sharing. It sounds like an extraordinary experience. And, the fact that each month, each year that goes by going forward, they're just going to be known as these twins.
Yeah.
And the fact that they were conjoined, gets smaller and smaller and smaller in the rearview mirror.
Yep.
You might pinch yourself at some point and say, if you didn't have the pictures to document that they were conjoined, who would even believe you, right?
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned that just last week, Allison was looking at pictures on her phone to transfer them to her computer to make sure she had a couple copies, one on a cloud and one on a computer. And she's showing me all these pictures. And I looked at her and I said, was any of this real? I said, did this really happen? And she said, oh, it happened. And I said, are you sure this isn't just some crazy dream? And, in the conversations that we've had with some of our surgeons, we've grown very close with some of these surgeons. Dr. Mihaliska has said multiple times how surreal this is. And he goes, was any of that real? Did that really happen? Did we really do this? I said, yeah, it really happened. But then I find myself asking my wife the same thing, like, is this real life? And it is. And it's been a phenomenal journey. And a lot of learning points along the way.
Yeah, I'm so thrilled that you find yourself in the situation that you are with the two of you parents, the three girls, and everybody seems to be as healthy as they can be given all the things that have transpired. I don't even know how to ask this other than just to be like perfectly straight. I'm a financial person.
Sure.
Right? That's what I do for a living.
Yep.
And my brain is wired with numbers. And a lot of decisions that we make as individuals or as parents, have to do with money, right? Can we afford this? Maybe that's the better alternative. And have you had to think about the financial aspect of all this? Do you have any sense, what the total bill has been from start to where we are now for the girls?
As far as the total cost of everything, I don't know if I could even begin to wrap my head around it. I remember looking one day, just the day the girls were born, the number was astronomical for the C-section and the care of the girls. Other than that, I have no idea.
Do you think it's hundreds of thousands of dollars, or do you think it's more than $1 million?
The day that the girls were born was $1 million day. Insurance settled for less than that, but the bill was $1 million day.
Holy moly.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you for putting that all in perspective. That is extraordinary. There's been some supporting organizations, and I think we need to give them the attribution that would be suitable. You had mentioned the University of Michigan, and I think previously you had mentioned specifically the Child Life Team.
Yes. Within the University of Michigan, they have different teams, and I was so very glad. My experience with palliative care doctors preceding the surgery were negative. A poor mindset on my half. When it's your kids, it's different. And these doctors came in and they would have a notebook and they would just lead a discussion, kind of like how you and I are talking right now. And they would take notes and they might circle things or highlight things during our discussion, and the next time we would meet, they would bring up the things that are maybe harder to talk about, like, do we have a birth plan if things aren't going well? What's our plan? What do we want? And what would be the ideal scenario if we're not getting the best scenario? Like I said, this A or B situation. If we're in scenario B, where we get to go back to the operating room to spend our time as a family, what can the medical professionals and the palliative care team do to make that as positive of an environment as possible, and not a sad environment? Because it's going to be a sad environment. There's no doubt about that. But how can we celebrate the life of the girls rather than mourn the loss that might be coming? Mm-hmm. So the palliative care team was amazing. And then the Child Life team was very much the same. I mean, leading up to the birth of the twins, they were very involved and concerned with how do we make this a normal experience for Kennedy so that she understands what's happening. It's still hard for us as parents to understand. I said to you, was any of that real? I try to imagine the mind of a 3-year-old knowing that the girls would be born conjoined and they might not make it. So the Child Life team, they actually sewed 2 cloth baby dolls together to give to Kennedy so that she could picture how the girls were conjoined. And they made a bear with a recording of the girls' heartbeats so that Kennedy would always have that. She could always listen to her sister's heartbeats, that if things were not the scenario that we're in. The thoughtfulness of those two organizations within the hospital were a tremendous help to us to deal with the gravity of such what could have been a very devastating situation.
Yeah, well, that's in addition to all the doctors that played critical role.
Oh, yeah. In addition to all the medical doctors that have kind of adopted us as a family, like I said, I don't know how often medical doctors give out their personal numbers, but if I have a problem in 10 minutes, I can be calling one of the surgeons or the anesthesia tech or whoever to say, we're on our way to the hospital right now, or what do you do? And anymore, now it's just a jovial exchange where I send them a picture of the girls and I say, how well do you know your twins? Who is who? U of M is a hospital like I've never been to before now. My experience is limited. I've been to maybe 4 hospitals in my entire life. Everybody working there, it almost feels like they're not working there for the money for what they do. They're working there because they genuinely care and love what they care about the patients that they help, and they love their profession. And that makes a big difference for parents going into a scenario with a lot of unknowns.
Yeah, well, it's amazing. You'd also mentioned that there is without social media, where would we be today, good or bad, that there's this unique closed Facebook group. Tell me something about that.
So there's a group for I think the heading is Families of Conjoined Twins, where grandparents, dads, moms, sisters, brothers, whoever was or related to a conjoined twin can join. It's closed and very private. I think it's more for moms than it would be for dads. Moms seem to talk and connect a little easier than dads would. Sometimes it seems to me that the tone of the group is a little more somber. A lot of families learning about a conjoined twin diagnosis or grieving the loss of their conjoined twins. And I think that just states the case that there's not nearly as many successful separations as there are losses. So I think the tone of the group just speaks to the reality of the diagnosis. There's a lot more loss than there is. It's a pretty exclusive club that these girls are in, that not only are they conjoined twins, they are separated. They are formerly conjoined twins.
And I know that one thing that you'd also mentioned, in addition to the hospital, child life team, palliative care team, this Facebook group, which is a great resource for young families like yourself, the church family has played a really important role. And I'm wondering how you'd characterize that.
Our church family has just taken us in with open arms and truly adopted us. Pray for us. It's been a very good fit for our family. Just to have that alone in your back pocket, to have a group of people that are praying for you and care about you, and no questions asked, no judgment, just we care for you guys. Is there any? Pastor, one time he did the financials just like you were doing. He said, Phil, you're not working. Allison's working. You've got what I can only imagine is tremendous medical bills. Is everything going okay for you? Can the church support you? What can we do? And I said, no, we've been very fortunate.
So it might be a good segue to talk about the Special Fathers Network. You've just learned about the organization and what it is that we're doing, putting this network of dads, in many cases, dads with more seasoning with all the different types of children that they've been raising with special needs. And I would just want to say thank you for sharing your story and being part of the network. But I'm sort of curious to know, what's your take on that? You mentioned just a moment ago that it's difficult for dads sometimes to reach out or to accept assistance. So I'm wondering, what is it that helps you, sort of go against that grain or to be more open to that?
Well, dads are very, very important to the family unit. I don't know that I would be the type of person I am today without my experience of my grandparents, my biological dad, my stepdad, and anybody else that has been a role model for me growing up. And most of those guys are very quiet, stoic. They're not going to reach out. They're not going to ask for help. and dads, being of that stoic nature, don't typically reach out. I need help, or just somebody to talk to, or to have a beer with, or whatever. Me, maybe here in this scenario, in this podcast, maybe would inspire a dad to be more present and available. I mean, the positive influence of a dad and a mom working together in their family unit, I don't think there are enough words to speak of those benefits. A father of a special needs kid being able to reach out and speak with another father of special needs so that they can share that common bond. I mean, like I said, these twins are they are in a pretty exclusive club. None of my friends who are parents will understand an iota of everything we've gone through emotionally. I mean, they can empathize, but they don't understand. But a father of a child diagnosed with autism, or a father of a Down syndrome child, will be able to reach out and share and bond with another father. And I think that's very important to help a dad lead their family and help protect their family. So I think what you guys are doing here is really, really cool, and I'm glad to be a part of it.
Yeah, well, we're thrilled to have you as part of the Special Fathers Network. Thank you for engaging. And I'm wondering if there's anything else you'd like to say before we wrap up.
The biggest thing that I think I've learned in the last 2 years, and I don't know why it's taken me 30 or 32 years to get to this point, but this power of positive, we cannot change the scenario in which we are placed, but we can change our attitude. I lived on the little bits of positive for 2 years in what seemed to be a very dark time, and that got us through it, and I hope that my living on the positive also helped get my family through it. So if you can grab onto those positives and pray about them, I think that you can have a little bit better smile on your face at the end of the day.
That's fabulous. So if somebody wants to learn more about your situation, or perhaps reach out to you, what would be the best way to do that?
You could read about our twins. I'm sure if you Google search Irwin Conjoined Twins, you can find us. That's IRWIN. U of M media team, they put out a really, really good video on their YouTube page. And I think that's Just Michigan Medicine, where you can kind of see the twins and what they went through. I will warn that it's a little graphic. They do show bits of the surgery, which I think is fascinating, but somebody might not want to see that. The U of M media team knew how to pull on your heartstrings when they made that video. But there's been articles, most of them are a cut and paste article from the original Free Press article that was written about our journey and the twins. So you could find us there. Typically we're pretty private people, but I'm sure if somebody really felt compelled to reach out to me, they could reach to you or through the Special Fathers Network, and we could be placed together however need be.
We'll include something in the show notes, so it'll be easy for people to either get to that U of M video or to one or more of the stories.
Sure.
Phil, thank you for taking the time and many insights. As a reminder, Phil is just one of the dads who's part of the Special Fathers Network, a mentoring program for fathers raising a child with special needs. If you'd like to be a mentor father or are seeking advice from a mentor father with a similar situation to your own, please go to 21stcenturydads.org. Thank you for listening to the latest episode of the Special Fathers Network Dad to Dad podcast. I hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as I did. As you probably know, the 21st Century Dads Foundation is a 501c3 not-for-profit organization, which means we need your help to keep our content free to all concerned. Would you please consider making that contribution? I would really appreciate your support. Phil, thanks again.
Yeah, thank you.
And thank you for listening to the Dad to Dad podcast, presented by the Special Fathers Network. The Special Fathers Network is a dad-to-dad mentoring program for fathers raising children with special needs. Through our personalized matching process, new fathers with special needs children connect with mentor fathers in a similar situation. It's a great way for fathers to support fathers. Go to 21stcenturydads.org. That's 21stcenturydads.org.
And if you're a dad looking for help or would like to offer help, we would be honored to have you join our closed Facebook group. Please go to facebook.com/groups and search Dad to Dad. Also, please be sure to register for the Special Fathers Network bi-weekly Zoom calls held on the first and third Tuesdays of every month. Lastly, we're always looking to share interesting stories. If you'd like to share your story or know of a compelling story, please send an email to david@21stcenturydads.org.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please be sure to subscribe on iTunes or wherever you listen. The Dad to Dad podcast was produced by Couch Audio for the Special Fathers Network. Thanks again to Reuben Law for supporting the Dad to Dad podcast. Call Reuben Law at 847-279-7999 and mention the Special Fathers Network for a free consultation. 847-279-7999.